Let's do a thought experiment. That's what Father Lonergan, or Father Ronner, rather, one of the probably three greatest theologians of the 21st century, said, we need to do a thought experiment. Because in our gospel, Jesus tells us that everything's going to come to an end. Our lives, the world, time, it's all going to come to an end. But we are tempted to think, well, why does it have to end? Wouldn't it be better if everybody could just live forever? No one ever has their lives, the lives of no one ever had to come to an end. Wouldn't that be better? And so Father Ronner says, well, let's do a thought experiment and let's see what would that actually be like if the life of no one ever ended. No one had to die. He said, well, what would that be like? Well, first of all, you could be a choir member for 100 years and then decide that you hate music and then be mad at the choir and never want to hear them because, well, you've got endless time, and then maybe, you could play the guitar for 1,000 years and then the upright bass for 20 years and then the electric guitar, and then you could choose to be a good person for 1,000 years, but then you could choose to be a bad person for 1,000 years. You could be a criminal for 5,000 years, and then you could choose to be a saint for the next 1,500 years, and then you could just be anything you wanted, any amount of time that you wanted. You could be a good person, you could be an awful, horrible person who hurt other people and destroyed life for 1,000 years, and then choose to be a saint for the next 1,000 years. None of it matters. And eventually, everyone would have married. You could marry this person for 5,000 years, marry this person for 50 years, and marry somebody else for 10,000 years, and marry somebody else for 500 years. But eventually, everybody would have done everything. They would have tried everything, and everybody would have married everybody else, probably. There's a scary thought. And eventually, life would mean absolutely nothing. Nothing would matter. What you did wouldn't matter. And so you could do anything. And eventually, life would be absolutely unlivable. And it would mean nothing whatsoever to be alive. And in our gospel, Jesus tells us that this is all going to come to an end. And it's an amazing thing about our human lives. The fact that it's going to end is one of the things that gives it meaning. That's one of the things that it gives human life meaning to live, is that this will end. And so I have a certain amount of time to make something of myself, and I don't know how much time I have. So what will I make of my life and of myself? Because human beings are that very strangest of animals. There is no animal that has to make itself become what it is. No bear has to make itself become a bear, and no lion has to make itself become a lion. But every human person has to choose to be human and has to make themselves to be human, because otherwise we'll be unhuman. We can act unhuman, and we can be inhumane. And it is an effort. It is an effort and a struggle that every human has to undertake to make ourselves to be a human being, a true human being. And so we live in this in-between time where the present moment that we're in, and then the time that we will have, and we don't know when that is. We live in the in-between. And so in our gospel, Jesus tells us this by saying this is all going to end. And Jesus isn't trying to be morose. He isn't trying to be gloomy. What he's trying to do is to help us to live in reality. To just live in reality. Because if we think that we are not going to die, we're living a lie. We're all going to die. As someone has said in a not so funny way, we're all going to be has-beens eventually. And if we live any other way, we're living a lie. And so Jesus tries to get us to live in reality. So what will it mean if things are going to end? That raises the question then of, well, let's say that we knew for sure that the world was all going to end at this same time next Sunday. Well, then how would we live? What would we do? What if we knew with absolute certainty that when we came to church next Sunday, everything was going to fold up and end? What in the world would we do? And I agree with those who say that the best answer, hopefully the best answer of all, is that we would all say, I wouldn't do anything different than I'm already doing. Because that would mean that I'm living my life the best way I know how right now. What would we do? Well, we hope that the best answer would be, I'll tell you what I would do. I would say, I love you to the same people. I might say it more times to them than normally, but I would say I love you and I care for you and take care to the same people that we do now. And we would love the same things, and we would make a good dinner, good meals, and we would go outside and we would enjoy the sunshine and the blue sky this morning and everything that we would miss so much. And we would come to church next Sunday and we'd sing songs and we'd be in the choir and we'd do the same thing. We always do, because we've already decided that this is the way I need to live, to be fully human, to make myself human, to make myself humane. It's the best way I know to live, and that's the way I'm living. So we wouldn't do anything different than we're doing now. We'd just be back here next Sunday, ready to meet the Lord. And so I think that's an extraordinary thing about what Jesus tells us during this season, that it's all coming to an end. And so then how would we then live? And the most hopeful and beautiful thing we could say is, I would live just the way I'm living now. I wouldn't do anything different because I'm already living the way I think this is the best way to live in God. Advent is the season of spiritual alarm clocks. It's trying to wake us up. Jesus tells us in our gospel, do not let our hearts become heavy, fall asleep. And so Advent is the season of spiritual alarm clocks. It tries to wake us up so that we live in a way that's ready to meet the Lord. Not only at the end of time, but also 4 weeks from now at Christmas. We'll be ready to meet Jesus in a new way. It's being born into the world in a new way, and that he'll be born into our lives in a new way. Will we be ready for that? That's what Advent is about. It's about living in this in-between time, between now and when Jesus will be born at Christmas, between now and when Jesus will come again at the end of time, between now and when he will be born into my life in a new way at Christmas. And so this is a time of spiritual alarm clocks. And the first spiritual alarm clock is simply what Jesus has said in our gospel. This will all end. And so how then are we going to live in the in-between? What if we knew it was ending next week? How would we live? So that's the first alarm clock. It wakes us up so that our hearts aren't heavy and go to sleep. The second alarm clock is the season of Advent itself. We have 4 weeks now of preparation of this in-between time to prepare for Christ being born into our hearts and our lives and our world in a new way at Christmas time. That whole Advent season and Leith Leaf will tell us what are some other ways at the end of Mass how we can celebrate this Advent season, and we can use it as a spiritual alarm clock to wake our lives up. And then the third alarm clock is always what we always have, the Eucharist. Isn't that one of the reasons we come here, is to wake us up from the drowsiness of our week, from getting caught up in all of the daily life. And we come here for an alarm clock to go off and go, okay, now I've got my life more in tune with God and with the things of God and with the people I love and the things that I love. And so let us come then, as we start this Advent season, this season of spiritual alarm clocks to wake us up. Let's come here to the table then and pray that our hearts will not be drowsy. We won't let our hearts get drowsy and go to sleep during the season.